let's talk Rose Bowl here, as you two are both repping the victors,
Yes, sir.
the
Yes,
Michigan
sir.
Come
Wolverines.
on.
And, it was a fantastic game as well. Final score, Michigan 27, Alabama 20 in overtime. This was a very, very interesting game because it felt like at different points, both teams could have ran away with this one, right? I think in the first half, Garrett, you showed us the gif of the guy just shooting himself in the foot. And that was Michigan at multiple points in this game. The turnover early, the muffed punt on the first drive that leads directly to an Alabama touchdown. A couple missed opportunities here and there throughout the game, but they weather the storm. Alabama looked like they had an opportunity to run away with this one. They had all the momentum in the fourth quarter, up 17-13. They're driving, and then Jalen Milroe fumbles. And that didn't directly lead to points for Michigan. They missed a field goal on that ensuing drive, but it definitely sucked the air out of that Alabama sideline, because if they drive down and score or even kick a field goal there, I think this could be a completely different result that we're talking about this evening. So both teams had their chances, but credit Michigan for weathering the storm, for being the more physical team. They just bullied Alabama up front this entire game, both on offense and defense. They did not let Alabama pin their ears back and rush the passer very often. And on the defensive side of the ball, they just destroyed the Alabama offensive line, which was a huge matchup we were watching for on the preview. So, guys, gutsy performance from J.J. McCarthy, 2 of 21 through the air, 3 touchdowns, added some, chain movers on the ground as well. Blake Corum gets the game-winning touchdown in overtime on a great run. But, when we were previewing this game, we said, this is going to be a physical defensive slugfest, and credit the Wolverines for weathering the storm.
Yeah, and the crazy thing to me was, look, when we broke this down and we talked about this, everyone kept saying that Michigan hasn't played a team as physical as Alabama, and there's no way that. And I was trying to caution everybody, guys. I don't know that Alabama's played a team as physical as Michigan. I know that Georgia's extremely good, but man, the violence that Michigan played with up front, the absolute, destruction up front on the defensive side, especially getting to the quarterback twice in the first 3 plays. Really just setting the tone that, hey, man, this ain't going to be like it used to be. Like, this is a long day for you, Jalen Milroe. You're going to get some, but it's going to be a hard process for you. I think that really set the tone early and kind of let everybody on that Bama sideline know how it was going to be from the Michigan side. Man, and you say weathering the storm. How many times did Michigan have to weather the storm? From the first play, needing a review to make sure that wasn't really a pick, to after the 3 and out that they got, muffing the punt, giving up a touchdown on a blown, gap assignment from a linebacker, several of those on the day on both sides, by the way. And man, just being able to come back, put together impressive drives, stay in the game, keep your head above water. Man, just really, really impressive to be able to see what they're able to do in bouncing back time after time, even at the very end of the game, right? Bama's driving. It looks like the clock's about to run out. They're about to go in here, put some points on the board. To be able to push them back and force the field goal, get the ball back with the ability to tie, and then, sprint down the field as fast as they possibly could and put that ball in the end zone. That was a massive bounce back for them. At that point, they had all the momentum. And man, just that Blake Corum unrelenting touchdown in overtime, that felt like what Michigan was all day. I feel like that was an overall picture of what Michigan was. Just, you come at me, sidestep, drag a guy, spin, right? Just, he wasn't going to be denied the end zone, and neither was Michigan for this W. I'm super impressed with the way Michigan played today. I think they were the better team. Man, they tried to give it away in some spots, but they were definitely the better team on the field today, and I think that they deserved the dub.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Obviously, for Jalen Milroe through the air, not a very successful day. And I think that can be accredited to Michigan's defense more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people on Twitter, I know a lot of Florida State fans were, oh, look at Jalen Milroe having a bad game. But, if you look down the field, like there's videos of Will Johnson's coverage on Jermaine Burton and some of those other DBs, whether it's Mike Sanderstroll or some of those other guys just guarding the wide receivers on Alabama's side of the football. There wasn't really anything to throw to. Some conservative play calls from Tommy Rees in that offense.
Yep.
It just looked like kind of a cluster on offense for Alabama. Jalen Milroe, you can see it right there on the screen, ran the ball 21 times. And that's honestly like unbelievable. He really had a hard time. And when I was watching the game, at least, it kind of seemed like Michigan was doing an excellent job keeping those linebackers out wide and eliminating the scramble, also eliminating the opportunity for the Alabama receivers or running backs to get outside. And it was honestly a great game to watch from Michigan's side of things. They scrapped the game out. Both special teams units were not having the best of days. But J.J. McCarthy did his job, and people can call him a game manager and call him, not a top quarterback because of the way that he plays the game. But I mean, 17 passes, 221 yards, 3 touchdowns, no turnovers, a very efficient game for him. And like you said, Garrett, Blake Corum, a relentless runner, one of the better running backs in college football all year long. And I will say Jace McClellan played an excellent game for Alabama. But overall, it just felt like Michigan's defense really came to play. The snapping problems from Chase McLaughlin and the Alabama offense just really sloppy, which is kind of weird from a Nick Saban Alabama team. But I think that's just the style of play Michigan plays with. Like you said, Garrett, they were playing really aggressive. They were playing really kind of non-relenting defense, and that'll shake you. It was the first time. I'm a Tennessee fan. I watched them play my team. I watched them play a lot. And even in that SEC championship game, really even in that loss to Texas, they didn't really look like they were going in the fetal position or like they were down. And in this game, it looked like a lot of the time Michigan was controlling and Alabama was trying to fight back and get back on top. And they were kind of underneath the whole game. And when it came down to it, Alabama had a chance. It was a weird kind of like RPO play call, that last play of the game. But either way, great defense from Michigan, and an excellent opportunity for them to win a national championship for the first time since 1997 or 1999, I believe. So
it's been a while. Well,
yeah,
it's crazy to say it too, because the snapping problems comes from when the defensive line is playing so good. You're not even thinking about the snap.
Sure.
You're thinking about where you got to get
Block.
off,
Yep,
who you got to fill, who you're hitting next. Massive credit to Michigan's D line on that. I thought that the D line versus O line battle on that side of the ball was the entire story. Their ability to get pressure, whoop the offensive line's tail on several plays. There were several that, someone would go make a play in the backfield, like, oh, if you just slip past him, I'm like, what are you talking about? The rest of the offensive line got whooped everywhere else. Like, it was just somebody else's a yard later, right? And so it was really impressive for me to look at the way that Michigan played on defense. For all the talk, and I am definitely in the camp of the SEC plays overall better football across the board. But for all the talk about SEC physicality and all that, Michigan came to play. That Michigan was the more physical team. Michigan was ready to ram it down your throat and just take it to you. And boy, did they. They absolutely out physicaled Alabama. And that's probably where a lot of the snapping problems came from, was he's not thinking about where he's snapping the ball, making sure he's getting it right in the right spot. He's thinking about, getting off so he can chip and getting off so he can fill that gap, because he's been getting whooped his entire game.
Sorry. Just one last point on it is kind of the matchup that we've got heading in with Michigan winning this game. And it was such a good prove it game for Michigan to come out and make such a statement by beating Alabama, because people were talking about their strength of schedule. They haven't played this, that, and the other. They beat the SEC champion. And this is actually the comment that I was wanting to get to, was that the defense for Michigan is ultimately going to get in Penix's face. The secondary for Michigan is going to be able to shut down those receivers for Washington. And it's almost like a perfect clash of the Titans between what proved to be one of the best offensive lines in college football after their showing today against Texas, giving up 0 sacks, a great secondary for Michigan that's going to have to hold one of the best receiving corps, if not the best receiving corps in college football in Washington. So it's honestly what proves to be at this point in college football. And I know there were the 1 and 2 seeds, and I know that, but I think a lot of people were still saying, is Washington legit? Texas has a lot of talent. I think this is the 2 most talented all-around football teams in college football this year. And the ability for both these teams to come out here, compete in the national championship game is really going to test Michael Penix as a quarterback, because he's going to have a lot of pressure. They're going to bring a lot of stunt blitzes. They did it a lot. Jesse Minter's really good at that. And they've got a great secondary. So the offense for Washington is going to be tested. But let's not sleep on Washington's defense. J.J. McCarthy is going to be tested. So it's kind of like it goes both ways, and both teams kind of proved why I'm one of the best teams in college football. And we knew that coming in, but I think we've got the top 2 in the national championship. A great game here in the Rose Bowl, and Michigan defense really impressed me a lot.
Yeah, you can't say enough about this Michigan defense. Held Alabama to just 288 total yards, 116 through the
Amazing.
air, 172 on the ground. Guys, they have not been held to that low of a yardage total since 2017. So
Wow.
it's been a
Sheesh.
minute since
Wow.
Alabama has been shut down to that level. And the biggest story was the 6 sacks, the 10 tackles for loss. Alabama had just 1 sack and 1 tackle for loss on the day on the defensive side. Can't say enough about the effort from the Michigan Wolverines. I want to talk more about the winners than I do the losers typically, but I do want to ask you guys, you hinted at it a little bit both ways here. There was a lot of poor execution from the Crimson Tide, whether it be botched snaps, whether it be a procedural penalty at an inopportune time, tons of uncharacteristically just bad execution from a Nick Saban coach team, but also really interesting play calls at different points in the game, right? Drew, you hinted at the conservative route running. You look at Jalen Milroe's stats, he completed vast majority of his passes, right? But they just weren't chucking it downfield. And it seems like when their offense has worked the best this year, it's letting Jalen Milroe run and letting him just use that howitzer of an arm to launch it downfield and, hope a receiver can make a play. That's been their most efficient offense this week, and they got away from both of those things. Had some design runs for Jalen Milroe, and they worked for the most part. But then at the end, they really went away from, letting him make a play in space. That's really my biggest complaint there on that last play call. I don't know if it was more of a play call thing. I don't know if it was an execution. It looked like they pulled a guard that he was maybe supposed to follow, and Jalen Milroe just kind of maybe went through the wrong opening there, thought he saw an opening up the middle, didn't, and it closed too quickly. I don't know. That's for the film room to decide, but it just seemed like a lot of uncharacteristically bad execution and uncharacteristically bad coaching, quite frankly, from this Alabama staff that didn't put their players in the best position to succeed.
Yeah, and I will say I was thinking about this earlier in the game, and it's kind of a constant theme throughout not just Alabama. Obviously, they're elevated because they're in the national semifinal, but throughout college football in general. And the one thing that I want to hint to is the transfer portal and the opportunity to bring in guys that you may not be in your system for 4 years, may not come in as a freshman, petrified of Nick Saban, then they build their way up to the starting lineup. Talk about a guy who came over from Louisiana and Trey Amos. He had his downtimes. He made some dumb mistakes, not only in this game, but throughout the season. And he didn't see the field as a starter, but he was in the slot a lot. He was a backup corner a lot. Jermaine Burton, a transfer from Georgia. Like, those aren't guys that are in Nick Saban's system consistently. And those seem to be the guys that Jermaine Burton is jawing all game. He's coming over to social media and causing problems. And that's not something that we're really used to seeing from Alabama in general. And so there was pre-snap penalties from Alabama that we're not used to seeing. There was snap problems from Chase McLaughlin that we're not used to seeing. But one of the biggest things just throughout the whole game and throughout college football in general is just the inability to come in, kind of create a structure and guys that you're getting out of high school, like you obviously could before the transfer portal era kind of made its mark on college football. But now that you've got 21-year-old guys, 22-year-old guys coming into your program already playing college football for 3 or 4 years, already playing for another coach or two, it seems like coaches, and including Nick Saban, who's arguably the greatest coach of all time at this level, it seems like they're having a hard time kind of reining in and becoming more disciplined. And when you look at teams who don't utilize the portal as much or have more of a homegrown team and guys who have been there for a while, those teams seem more disciplined. Michigan doesn't have a lot of guys that they utilize through the portal. They have some, but Will Johnson came there as a true freshman. J.J. McCarthy waited his turn. Blake Corum's been there for a long time. Offensive line is pretty set, and they got some defensive transfers to help them out. But it was a really disciplined game from Michigan. And so, yeah, that's just one thing I observed throughout the season is kind of that transfer portal aspect of the game kind of coming into play with the X's and O's.
Well, maybe a little bit tongue-in-cheek here, but it sounds like Nick Saban needs to pick his portal players better if there's going to be problems in the attitude and everything.
Yeah,
so maybe
seriously.
big guys are going to be a little better. No, I mean, obviously, you're going to get that a little bit. I think you got a really good point there. For me, when I look at this, Trey, you were talking about not using the cannon of the arm. He tried it a couple times, but it was covered. I mean, down the field, deep shots. He tried. I remember 2 specifically. One, he tried to go down the field to to Burton on the sideline, and Johnson had him just blanketed. I mean, just
Strapped,
there wasn't anything there. I think it went a couple yards out of bounds anyways, but there wasn't anywhere to throw that football. If you threw that ball in bounds, it's going Michigan's way. And there's another one. I think they decided, let's try to attack the middle of the field. Rod Moore had that thing covered too. I can't remember if it was Burton running the route or if it was Bond or whoever else, but Burton had Rod Moore. He had it covered up, and all the way down the field, walking with him step for step, gets thrown, adjusts to the ball, and he just steps in the way of it, knocks it away, no problem. And so they tried to go for the deep stuff, but it just wasn't there. And regardless of when they tried to or not, the O-line was getting whooped. I mean, they didn't have time to go down the field anyways. And so I do think part of it was going away from what was working, but also part of it was just what was working doesn't against Michigan. They just didn't let you. It was a terrible matchup. They ran into an absolute buzzsaw of a front seven who, got after the quarterback and was harassing Miller all night. And then also you flip that to the other side and, he got a couple of chances at some chunk plays, but it just wasn't there. There weren't those opportunities. He threw good balls, but they just weren't there to be caught for the receivers. I think the best ball I thought he threw was that kind of out-breaking route towards the sideline that he caught with the 1 foot in for Isaiah Bond, just kind of floated up and over a guy. That was his best ball, I think, of the day. It's a good chunk play, but it's not going to be there for you. And if you can't do that all day, they weren't going to have success against Michigan. That just you had to have some kind of balance. They didn't have it.
You make great points, guys. And I think it's something that they're going to be talking about for a long time either way in Tuscaloosa. And it's going to be fascinating. Just like we talked about with Texas, it's going to be fascinating to see how Alabama responds to this. Nick Saban is not going to be done. Just when everyone wants to count him out, that's when he seems to do his best. So we'll see how they respond in the offseason. We'll see if they adjust their strategy in the recruiting game, in the transfer portal game. But that's a bunch of conversations to leave for the offseason.
Gracious, how about that?